Welcome to this edition of the Times Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. We are technology and business reporters at TOI. The two of us will moderate this discussion. We hope you and your families are staying safe and doing well. Our hearts go out to those who've lost their loved ones battling COVID-19. Our discussion today is on new age health tech startups. The pandemic's having a profound effect on the lives of millions of people around the world. The crisis has brought unprecedented challenges both for people and society, with enormous loss of human lives and increasing casualties each day. It also presents an unprecedented challenge to the public health system. New age health tech startups are providing rays of hope by addressing health challenges in totally new ways, using digital technologies in combination with hardcore research. To discuss this, we have three health tech entrepreneurs who are doing absolutely cutting edge work.
We have with us Emmanuel, the CEO of BrainSightAI. She has 14 plus years of experience in healthcare management, policy, and consulting. She's had an MBA in healthcare from ISB, and she has used her learnings in consulting projects for the Government of India and some of the highest impact organizations like Clinton Health Access Initiative. She has previously worked at NetApp and Offshore Development Center of Cisco at Infosys. We also have with us Dr. Praapti Jayaswal. She is a scientist turned entrepreneur with a PhD in tuberculosis research and over a decade of training in molecular biology. She was inspired by the concept of translation of research. She is motivated to apply her education to real-world problems. Praapti co-founded Arogya AI to provide precision diagnosis for infectious diseases using genomics and artificial intelligence to enable prescription of effective drugs to patients. Arogya AI's first product helps diagnose drug-resistant tuberculosis 100 times faster than existing gold standards.
And we have with us Dinesh Koka. Dinesh, together with Vikas Ramachandra, co-founded Onward Health, a healthcare analytics startup in medical imaging, machine learning, and data science. Dinesh previously spent over 12 years at Wipro GE Healthcare. Onward Assist is seeking to help improve cancer treatment outcomes by solving the problem of accurate and timely cancer diagnosis. Onward is building AI tools in collaboration with leading cancer institutes in India and the US. 5 of their AI tools are undergoing clinical trials now. Welcome to all three of you, Laina, Praapti, Dinesh. Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Shilpa and I will put them to Laina, Praapti, and Dinesh. Let me start with Laina. Laina, I mean, each of you, can you tell us, I mean, we've had discussions before with each of you, and the kind of work you're doing is absolutely fascinating. Can each of you describe to our audience what exactly you do, the kind of products that will come out of the work that you're doing? Laina, you want to start?
Sure, Sujit. Thank you so much for having us here, first of all. So at BrainSightAI, what we're building is a neuroinformatics platform that can give unique insights into brain structure and function. So think about it like a Google Maps for the brain. That's how I at least explain it to my mom. You have the structure, which is the roadmap, and then you have the function, which is the traffic map of the brain. So looking at brain activity and connectivity patterns for insights into things like dementia, schizophrenia, and also for neurosurgical issues. So our platform is called VoxelBox, and we are currently in the process of doing clinical studies with it right now.
Okay. So what exactly will it do eventually for patients?
So essentially, brain function is one of the, in research, it's one of the most promising candidates for answering questions like, does this person have early forms of dementia, or will they move to an amnesiatic form of dementia? Or being able to look at a patient with psychosis and to be able to confirm whether the underlying disorder is schizophrenia with bipolar, or are there other indicators there. And for neurosurgical issues, it can help you in better planning for the tumor. So being able to say that if you're looking at a tumor, should you be approaching the tumor from the right side or from the left side? with minimal functional loss for the patient? These are some of the questions that we are able to answer using this platform, but the potential of the imaging modalities we use is immense. It's been used in research circles for everything from Parkinson's to Tourette's to so many other disorders.
Okay, we'll come back to more of that later. Praapti?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Sujit. I'm happy to share on this platform what Arogya AI does. So from the beginning of time, mankind has been threatened by bugs, pathogens. There was the plague, and then there was polio and HIV AIDS, and now there's the pandemic that COVID-19 has brought about. Experts believe that superbugs will cause the next pandemic because antimicrobial resistance is on the rise. For the audience who does not know antimicrobial resistance, drugs that are simply going to kill a pathogen are no longer effective in doing their job. And that is essentially what antimicrobial resistance is. And that is steadily on the rise, such that the World Health Organization believes that by 2050, we'll have 10 million people dying every year from antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, as I will allude to it. Now, the problem with AMR is that right now, we don't have tools that are good enough to diagnose it. So delayed diagnosis of antimicrobial resistance obviously delays treatment for these patients. And that in turn increases the risk of spreading of these diseases. It's just giving an invitation to the next pandemic, and we need to be better prepared. We need faster and more precise diagnostics. And now with technology coming up in such a big way, Arogya AI employs genomics and artificial intelligence to provide precision medicine and precision diagnosis for antimicrobial resistance manifesting infectious diseases. We're going after tuberculosis first because that's the most lethal infectious disease globally now, that besides COVID right now. And India has 1/3 the global TB burden. It's ridiculous because TB is a curable disease. But the problem is doctors don't always know which drug will work for whom because of drug resistance. And Arogya AI is able to identify exactly which drug will work for whom 100 times faster than the existing gold standard by using this kind of cutting edge technology, and actually help doctors prescribe effective medication to patients.
You demonstrated it already 100 times faster.
Yeah, it takes 2 months to do that gold standard test, and we're able to do this in a matter of a few hours. So if you do the maths.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll come back to that again later. Dinesh?
Sure, Sujit. Thanks for the introduction as well. I mean, just to add to that, when we started at the start of our venture, when we were talking to a lot of oncologists, right? So one thing that we realized is they look at a lot of data, right? A lot of patient data before they actually come up with the treatment decision, right? How to treat a treated patient, and what kind of medications to take, and what kind of therapy to follow. I mean, one thing that we realized after looking at all of that data, the success rate of cancer treatment decisions is pretty still pretty poor, right? If we compare some of the other diseases, right? So almost half of all patients, cancer patients, don't respond to a line of treatment, right? So when we basically went about understanding what are those things, right? What are those building blocks which kind of contribute to that, and that's primarily how we got started, right? So we looked at each of these building blocks, and when we realized, following those conversations with oncologists, we spoke to radiologists, pathologists, and treating oncologists, tumor boards. There's essentially they're looking at variety of data, right? Different types of patient data, putting them together, and doing a lot of stats primarily in their brain, right? And combining with a lot of algorithms that they already have in their mind in terms of, I've treated so many thousands of patients in my experience, and these are the number of patients who responded to a line of treatment, and kind of what is the prognosis? Let me treat this patient the same way, right? So broadly they're using algorithms at some level, and we saw classically, right, some of these problems could be structured like a classical machine learning problem statement, and that's exactly how we went about, right? This is combined with our understanding of, courtesy of the domain expertise that we had in terms of having worked with some of these, specialities. So today, what we exactly do is, one of the modalities is pathology, right? You have a pathologist looking at a cancer biopsy slide through a microscope and trying to take an accurate enough, reporting decision within a reasonable amount of time, right? The challenge there is, you don't have enough of them. In India, we have about 600 expert cancer pathologists, right? So what we've done, for example, is build, models which are structured to mimic that process, right? And assist the pathologists. Look at a cancer biopsy slide and help them in identifying those areas of interest within that. And that's exactly the AI tools, the 5 AI tools that you mentioned, in those biomarkers. What the, platform does is looking at those biopsy slides and assists in helping them, completing the reporting process faster, right? So the in terms of benefits, since we're discussing that, we've actually looked at reducing the process of reporting time by about almost 30 to 40%. But more importantly, you're able to, you have a situation where you have only about 600 expert pathologists. By doing this, you're able to, dramatically improve the productivity, right? So that's primarily. So pathologist plus the AI platform, we're trying to reach, faster diagnosis, but also advanced clinical information, right? We've also uncovered by using, some of the advanced techniques, we can actually look at the same biopsy slide, but extract or discover new clinical information, which may be useful for the oncologist to take a more accurate treatment decision, right? So the goal is also, one is around time and effectiveness, but also reduce that gap in terms of the number of patients who respond to a line of treatment, right? So the biggest focus area for us is cancer pathology, but we work in some of the other modalities as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me. Shilpa and I saw, Watson and all that, IBM Watson and things. We saw a demonstration once in Manipal Hospital. They had tied up, and there again, I think they're trying to, of course, cancer, trying to predict better and all that. In some sense, what you would be competing with that?
Watson, not necessarily. So Watson for oncology, what Manipal and Apollo were trying, is primarily was built to look at different types of patient data, assist the tumor board, right? Tumor board is like this collection of doctors who sit around and then look at a file and then take a treatment decision. Watson was not necessarily around predicting a specific treatment. It was also about picking up, academic literature. So an oncologist looks at a lot of data. They look at the data, dip into my expertise or experience, and also look at a lot of academic literature, right? What's happening around the world? What is the latest? Because that's what doctors actually do, right? So Watson was also about predicting, what type of treatment you should follow, one, but also picking up academic literature and kind of showing it up to them. For us, while we want to get there eventually, right, we've taken a different route. The specific route we've taken is pathology, cancer pathology. You still need your pathologist to look at the biopsy, give the report, and then need to be fed into an intelligent system like a Watson, right? So we are focusing on those modalities because the underlying reason is there's a significant amount of information, like 60 to 70% of information that can be provided by these modalities like pathology, which goes into, taking a cancer treatment decision. Yeah.
Okay. Laina, give us a sense of the kind of technologies that you're using to get to your end objective.
Sure, absolutely. So we use these cutting edge imaging modalities called resting state fMRI, which is essentially you ask the patient to go into an MRI machine and rest for 7 to 10 minutes. We take a 10-minute video. Now, this is a very complex 4-dimensional data set. So the first thing that we need to do in terms of technology is being able to process this to actually figure out the signal. So that's the first thing. Once you figured out the signal, the next thing you need to do is use AI, because no radiologist can actually sit and look at this video for 10 minutes and figure out what is the dance pattern that is going on in the brain. To give you an analogy, it'll be like, do you look at a dance pattern and say, this is 60% Bhangra and 40% pop? That's the kind of work that you need to be able to do. So can you use AI to help in making those comparisons better? That's the second set of technology. Once you've done that, being able to take all of the information that AI has taken and being able to map it back into the 3D space so that it works with the anatomical understanding of the doctor. So you can't show a bunch of statistics to a doctor and ask him to make decisions based on that. You need to kind of bring it back to the brain space and show it to them. So that's the third one, which is 3D visualization. And the last one is 3D simulation. So essentially being able to kind of show this brain, and each person's brain is very different. Yours is very different from mine. So being able to simulate different scenarios for a particular individual so you can take better decisions for them. So that's the fourth one. Signal processing, AI, 3D visualization, and 3D modeling.
Wow, wow. And how close are you to the final product?
So we've already deployed our first set of signal processing toolkits on the GE platform already. We have done AI on 2 of the clinical use cases. So I had talked about schizophrenia, I had talked about dementia. We've done some amount of work on that. And we've also done some amount of work on the neurosurgery brain tumor cases. So that's on the AI part. The 3D visualization part is something that we are doing with Dassault Systems right now, and we are building out the 3D models of the brain. And my partner, in fact, Dr. Rimchim Agarwal, who did her PhD from NIMHANS, has done work on the 3D simulation as well. So being able to look at where do you place the electrode? Should you place the electrode here or here for better neurostimulation? So being able to do those kind of scenario building, that's something she's done as part of her PhD.
So a piece of your technology has already gone into a GE product, you said, is it?
Absolutely. Onto the GE platform, the GE Edison platform, yes.
Okay, okay. And you earn a revenue from that already?
So we are in the process of those conversations, and we are hoping that that would pan out over the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay, okay. Praapti, similar question for you. I mean, what AI tools, of course, you're building your own algorithms and AI, and I guess you need lots of data to kind of get to where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely, Sujit. So we basically, the gold standard test is when you grow these bacteria or bugs in the laboratory and you put a drug, the drug should kill them. And you see whether they survive or they die. And based on that, you figure out whether they're resistant or susceptible to that drug. Now, the tuberculosis bacteria takes 2 months to grow in culture. Now, what you see, you can see that Praapti has black hair, brown eyes, because you can see it. But that is encoded in my DNA. And that's exactly what we exploit for the bacteria. Instead of waiting for it to grow over that 2-month period, we extract the DNA and sequence the DNA. Imagine it as a 14,000 page book, but that book has not yet got any formatting. So it's just text of 14,000 pages. This is where the magic of my co-founder comes in. Avlokita is a bioinformatician. She's been doing bioinformatics and coding for biological data. I've been growing the bacteria in the lab through my research years. She's been doing the informatics side. So she takes that 14,000 page book, annotates and aligns it, essentially giving it paragraphs and punctuation to simplify the concept. And then we look for typos within that context. Each of those typos refers to a resistance pattern. And that's what we pick up. The AI is able to learn these patterns and generate outputs much faster by going through that 15,000 page book. And that's essentially the magic that comes together. So it's big data analysis, and we just want to extract as much useful information to start staying ahead in this game of survival against these pathogens. So that's essentially what we do.
How soon are you to your final product?
Just like Laina said, right. So we've built this algorithm for 5 drugs and another 5, which is the second line of defense for TB drugs already. It's been deployed on the GE Healthcare Edison platform, and the clinical validations will then lead to actual monetization or going to market, as they say, of the product. So that's where we're at currently in the process.
Okay, okay. Shilpa?
Right. Laina, coming to you first, I just wanted to hear from you, what are some of the barriers to entry? Because you're each one of you are solving very unique set of challenges. If you can share your story, how did you overcome them? And how did investors really buy into your idea as well?
Sure. So we are now 1.5 years old. And I think one of the biggest challenges, so the technology that we use has multiple different use cases. So we started off with psychiatry because that was where my co-founders' expertise really lay in. But we realized that for psychiatrists, it's a market building exercise right now. We are in a lot of ways a category creator. And so we need to be able to work with people and convince them that this is indeed a good way to do it. And psychiatrists were in fact not as excited about it. And so we had to pivot quite a bit to actually come to the point where we are today, where we're working with neurosurgeons and who have a very immediate use case for our work. So I think that was the first challenge, really kind of getting to product market fit, which I think every startup goes through. But our startup is unique in that we have to be creating this market and telling people about it. So that's a challenge that we have, and we're kind of addressing it by working with these Fortune 500 companies who really kind of help us think about it in a much more large-scale industrial way. And in fact, GE has been very instrumental in us being able to build this product as an industrial grade product as opposed to making it as a startup, smaller product. So I think these were some of the key challenges. And I think also in the healthcare sector, you need to be very regulatorily compliant from the very beginning because you're working with lives, and being able to figure that out while you're also figuring out product market, while you're also trying to figure out how to build a remote team, all of those coming together, that was quite the challenge.
And from an investor standpoint, Laina, so,
I think, yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't mention that. So I think from an investor standpoint, it has been difficult, especially when you're a category creator. It has been more difficult to convince investors about the potential of this. What we've realized is that the risk appetite for our kind of work is a little bit more outside than in India, where in India they look at a lot of de-risking already has happened before they invest. But in a situation like ours, which is really cutting edge technology, we haven't seen that much of a risk appetite. But now that we are 1.5 years into our journey, we are seeing a lot more investor interest now. So over the past 1.5 years, I think a lot of my time was spent in educating investors about what we are doing.
Right. Thanks, Laina. And Dr. Praapti, you've also had a first mover advantage. If you can share your story on what are some of the challenges that you, experienced and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, most definitely. So if you'd allow me, I'd like to tell you about the inspiration that brought us here. So I did my PhD at the Translational Health Science and Technology Institute. The word translation essentially was driven home by one of the revolutionaries in the field, Dr. M.K. Bhan, who is essentially the godfather of the Indian biotech startup ecosystem, right? He founded the institute, and in one of his foundation day speeches, I remember him saying, explaining the concept of translation for the first time, putting your research to real world application from the bench to the bedside. That drove my transition from science to entrepreneurship. And like Laina was saying, it's, you get a lot of people doing biology, studying biology. There are a bunch of coders who do AI and ML. How often do they sit together and talk? And then how often do you find them worrying about problems like tuberculosis, who a lot of people I have had to correct when they say, "Arey, TB is a poor man's disease." It's really not. It's like any other infectious disease. You cough, you get it. The bacteria or the virus does not figure out what your economic status is. Yes, if you're a little well-to-do, you have the option of isolating in 2 separate rooms. Probability of transmission could be lower. But that's one of the bigger pain points, Shilpa, that I've had to communicate to all audiences, investors, or even just folks in alike, that it's not going to be dependent on what your economic strata is. It's an infectious disease. It does not discriminate. So that's been one of the bigger challenges. But Bill Gates yesterday gave us more hope. He resonates with my pitch. And what he said at an Illumina event a couple of days ago was, the beauty about pathogen genetics is that it is pathogen agnostic, meaning what we're building today can be scaled to other infectious diseases that manifest antimicrobial resistance. And that's been my pitch for 1.5 years. it's just so much easier when someone like Bill Gates articulates it for you and validates it for you. But that's the journey we want to be in. That's the end goal we want to see. And it's taking some time, but I think on your question about the investors, they're listening and they're so much more aware about the processes, and they're so much more at least open to have these discussions. So they're making those efforts to really understand the science behind these deep tech companies that we're building by translating our education into real world applications. So I think we're going onward, as they say.
Yeah, onward and upward, Praapti. Yeah. Coming to you, Dinesh, as much as we talk about, building a global first, product and solution, how are you looking at scaling up your products? If you're planning to expand to other countries, what are some of the plans that you have in mind?
Sure. While we are building it in India, like you said, we are building it for the world. So right from the early stages of when we were building the core technology around pathology AI, we were very careful to pathology is a fairly diverse space, right? So there's a primary biopsy, then there are follow-on biomarkers, and it differs by cancer. Different types of cancers have different biomarkers as well. So we started by focusing on breast cancer, but when we went into building specific AI models, we chose, we did a lot of due diligence ourselves in terms of talking to pathologists and understanding exactly which of those are relevant for them for two reasons. One, for them to be interested, right? It's part of their daily process. At the same time, eventually when we finish building that AI tool, it will get readily adopted, right? Because it solves a real problem. So those were the two things that we were doing due diligence on. So, in that sense, pathology is common to India or the world, right? In terms of the challenge. The second way is we also have clinical collaborations with leading cancer institutes currently in the US, and now we are actually adding one more study in UK in NHS. So through these, while the problem is the same, right? The way they adopt the problem, the way they adopt the solution is going to be different. So we use these collaborations to understand what is the workflow, what is the clinical workflow in the way they work, and how are they going to adopt our solution, right? So that way, we've been able to understand what's happening there, and the way we build our solution also. While we have the AI layer, we also build a software layer, which is a telepathology or a digital pathology platform, which helps pathologists, adopt the AI tools easier. So we've already started commercializing that in India. And in the US, we've done a couple of POCs or pilot projects where the academic institute is using the software, not the AI, but the workflow. Tomorrow, for us to be able to deploying the AI on top of the platform becomes easier. That is one. And second, of course, we are part of a few programs, including Edison. So there, through the program, we actually had the opportunity to interact with teams globally, right? The oncology modality or tech teams from Europe. That gave us a lot of insights around what is relevant for them, right? So you also need to look at interoperability, right? Building fancy, cool stuff is good, but you have to make it easier for a clinician to adopt it as well, right? Because they will already have some information systems in-house. So, that was pretty critical for us, right? Understanding, the significance of interoperability and building those pipes, right? Ultimately, that is what is going to make a difference whether someone can actually use all the stuff that you've built by making it easy for them to use. I think those are a few ways that we've at least kind of made progress on.
Okay. So on both sides of the world, were they receptive to embracing the best practices and even tweaks to the technology stack?
Absolutely, yes. So oncology is a tough modality, right? So kudos to all doctors, but within cancer, we're already facing a lot of challenges, right? Like earlier what we had mentioned. So they've been very open, right? So right from day one, we started about 3.5 years back. Right from the initial conversations, doctors have said, what, great. I like what you're doing. Obviously, they did their due diligence in terms of we knew what we were talking about. We are not kids, all respect to kids, but we're not just popping in and saying, what we'll use all these image recognition toolkits which work for cats and dogs, and we'll just throw it at some medical images. But we understood what a cancer hospital looks like, the challenges that they go through, and also built some of the early prototypes, right? Because my co-founder Vikas, he has a PhD in this space and has been working in that has 15 patents in his name. So we build those initial prototypes, and clinicians say, okay, great. So this is the promise, right? If this is the promise, I'm willing to put in my time. So that's something that we are very thankful for. So we have 8 clinical partnerships across India and the US. So that has been definitely critical in terms of building what we have built till date. Yeah.
Thanks, Dinesh.
It takes time, is it? And clinical trials and all of these things. I mean, this is a question for all of you. I mean, how much time does it take to bring something to market in these areas?
I can go first. So, in terms of timeline, like I mentioned, we are talking about per biomarker, right? So we build AI tool per biomarker. So the platform today covers five biomarkers. So each of those tools would have followed a process of about between 12, 18 months and more as well. So you're starting with due diligence around what the problem is, then you're putting data together, building the model, the AI model per se. Then you do internal validations because we have pathologists in-house as well. And then you do clinical trials. So even before they get to clinical trials, you've already gone through a process of about 12 to 18 months. That is the process, at least we follow.
So yeah, I think we are 1.5 years into the process of doing the due diligence and figuring out, I think with COVID, some of the studies that we were supposed to do, we won a Government of India grant to be able to do it, that got delayed because the hospital, Max Hospital we were working with was declared a COVID hospital, and the grant also got delayed. But essentially it takes 12 to 18 months for the clinical study itself and collecting the data and doing the due diligence, and following which you need to be a lot more. You need to be able to show that clinicians really love what you're doing and then take it to market. So I would say 2 years to 2.5 years, Dinesh, would that be a correct way to say it?
True, exactly. I mean, end to end. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. So I'm coming from an academic background.
From the start of your...
Yes, from the start, as Dinesh very correctly said.
Go on.
We're working on each biomarker separately, like each clinical use case is a different use case. So per clinical use case, being able to show validity and being able to show that it really kind of helps a clinician takes like a 2-year cycle. For the workflow tool, it's far easier where you're able to show that this really speeds up things for the doctor. So that's probably a 6-month to 8-month journey where you kind of build a workflow tool. So yeah, sorry, Praapti, interrupted you.
No problem at all. So just for the audience to appreciate, this is a stark difference to academia, where academia, a similar process would take almost twice as long. And that's the difference between, actually executing research into real world application in the context of a business or a startup as an entrepreneur, where the speed is just so addictive and things happen really quick because stakes are very different. So Laina and Dinesh have spoken 2 to 2.5 years of a gestation period before the product to market. In an academic context, that is lightning fast. And all of the COVID solutions that have come about in less than a year, this is exceptional. This has not happened in science before at this speed. So things are definitely getting better, and transitioning from academia, a 2 to 3 year gestation period, while in business in general is too long for healthcare startups. We're zooming forward is how I see it.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, Laina, Praapti and Dinesh, from a talent standpoint, how difficult was it for you guys to get talent on board? Because, it is a scarce resource. If you're talking about pathologists and, your competitors and other hospitals are dipping into the same talent pool. So if you can help us understand how you went about from your talent journey.
Sure. I think I'm fortunate in that my co-founder is like this powerhouse of talent. She's done 3D modeling, simulation, AI, and signal processing all at the same time, which is usually found in different sets of people. I think with her at the helm, it's easy to kind of break it down into pieces and say that, we need a team which is built around AI. And there are a lot of people who are in AI, but I think as a startup, we are of course not able to really afford them. So we have to really think about ways to attract talent. And I think that has also been one of the challenges over these 18 months. How do you, when you're like this little bacha, how do you kind of attract talent to your company when you're building such a cutting edge thing? But I think it's slowly getting better. When we started out, we had a very small team. We had some really amazing people who were really into the cause, because being able to enable precision psychiatry, being able to enable early diagnosis of dementia, these are really big problems. And we attracted talent who were really into those problems. And I think they stayed with us, and we're very grateful for them. And then as we are becoming bigger and have these Fortune 500 companies backing us, I think now more people are aware of us and are coming to us.
Right. Dr. Praapti?
We had a similar experience. So initially, almost exactly a year ago, actually, when the lockdown was going on, we were 3 people team. We were building, but we were a little world opened up, because now we had we floated a couple of internship JDs on LinkedIn, Europe, and all parts of India. So we just capitalized on it, because a lot of colleges were shut. People were just asked to not work for 2 or 3 months. So they were just free and they had time. So there was a point in time where we had talent all across the globe. And there was a joke where Arogya AI is functioning 24 hours in a day and everyone is getting sleep. So for a good few months, I think from April to probably July, 2-3 months, we had a big mix of people. And of course, they came for a month, a couple of months, and did small internships. But a lot, like Laina said, it helps to have a technical founding team, because there's a lot that needs to be done. We need people to do it. So we got people from all over the globe to do little things for us as small internships. And of course, then that really catapulted us to be at a position where we got into the Lumina Accelerator program and more talent. So like Laina, as you do, attracts more people who want to work with you, not just for, to solve the problem that you're solving. So hopefully we can, gather enough resources to entertain them going forward.
Dinesh.
Yeah, so whatever talent brings to us, right? Brings to an organization, we've tried to solve in 2-3 ways, right? So one, we typically know which are the best institutes which are working in signal processing and doing cutting edge research in the exact areas that we are in, right? So we reach out, right? We reach out, talk to experts. In that sense, we've been lucky. We had a lot of clinical expertise to fall back on through our partnerships from our core talent, right? Model building talent. Deep tech talent is a challenge, right? I think this has been enough documented, because if you're looking at the cutting edge, obviously as a startup, are you going to be able to afford, right? So it's a longer process for us in terms of we stay patient. We talk to a lot of people, but we've been very lucky to have we've been able to build a fairly strong team, right? So these are the kind of folks, like I said earlier, spread across India, but these are really passionate people and bring a very strong technical skills, right? And obviously a lot of the initial training is typically around broad-based image recognition, machine learning, deep learning. From a clinical standpoint, what we've been able to put together is a process where we've kind of done a template, right, in terms of people getting to speed at what we do. And so that is the reason why today we're very confident about the kind of team that we have, because our only competition, we lose people to research programs, postdocs, PhD programs, right? And not necessarily to other companies. So that is something that we're pretty proud of, right? So the work is very interesting, and people here are primarily about motivated more by the challenge that you're trying to solve, right? You're actually being able to put tech to use to solve something fairly significant, which you don't get in usually all the other opportunities. And that's how we've kind of addressed it.
In fact, it's interesting you say that, Dinesh. I think one of the things that we've realized over the past 18 months is when you're building your leadership team, you kind of are looking for people who like to coach, because there is a lot of talent which you need to coach into doing these kind of deep tech things. There's a lot of interest in being able to apply tech to good use, but it's not what you learn right out of the college, right? Like it's not, you don't know how to do this kind of signal processing for psychiatric disorders. So you need a team which consists of people who love to coach. And that is something that we were trying to kind of, while we do our recruitments, we're making sure that at least the leadership team has that servant leadership kind of attitude.
Nice.
Okay. Now, just to, all of you can answer, but let me start with Praapti. Your technology, can you extend that to COVID?
It's already being done. So it's done at a central level where the Indian CSIR IGIB is sequencing 5% of all COVID positive cases. It's being done at a bigger scale with a bigger cause. So the resources are all there, and yes, it's definitely scalable and applicable in that context.
They're using this Arogya AI technology? No. Praapti is breaking a little, is it?
No, we haven't built it for COVID because we don't have all of that information just yet. So it's already being done at a different level. But is it better now?
Yeah.
Maybe you can loop back.
There's a little break sometimes in yours. Go on.
Yeah, so they're not using our technology. We haven't built something for COVID, but it's being done at the central level for exactly this purpose.
Okay. But the approach that you've taken for your for tuberculosis, etc., can that be extended to COVID?
It's extendable in theory to any pathogen for sure, to figure out which drugs will work and which ones won't. So the genetic basis and the application in all pathogen genomics is the same. So in theory, yes.
Okay. Laina, Dinesh, or how do we deal? This kind of pandemics. These newer technologies that all of you are working on. These can be useful in future dealing with these kind of pandemics.
Yeah, so we have a telepathology workflow, like I mentioned, the software platform. So these were typically built to connect with microscopes and help a pathologist see the glass slide image from a remote location. So we did do for COVID specifically, we did do a small pivot, and we built a layer on top of it. So today, the workflow software is the same. So we can connect to RT-PCR machines and enable microbiologists to report on the batch data, which comes out of the PCR, RT-PCR. So it's actually being used in a few labs, and what it actually helps them is it manages the workflow, right? Earlier, microbiologists would have had to sit right there and then sit right next to the PCR machine. So using our workflow, it connects to the PCR machine, allows the microbiologist to log into a platform, report on it, approve the batch, and then integrates to an LIS. So it's in terms of benefits, we've actually shown reduction of time, right? It used to take about 30 minutes to report a batch because you're going through either 94 samples or 96 or a 384. You're able to bring that down to about 10 minutes. Or put it another way, if you're processing 5,000-6,000 in a day, like some of the busiest labs do that much samples. We have these folks now scaling up to 20,000-21,000 samples a day, especially now, right? Especially in the last few weeks. So that's primarily. So we did this. We saw, what can we do kind of, to solve, because, people were really drowning in a number of samples, and, obviously within a set of resources that they had, we've kind of just pivoted on the workflow platform, and we worked with a few labs, and they said, great, this will actually work for us, and that's how they adopted it.
Okay. Laina, you want to say something?
Sure. So brain health is often considered synonymous with mental health, and our work has a lot of implications for mental health. what we've realized during this COVID times is that there's going to be just so much grief around. There's just going to be so much unprocessed grief in the next coming few months. And as a team, we've been thinking about ways in which we could help. And there are 2-3 ways which we've thought. One is that our team really by themselves have been thinking of spending a lot of time working with psychiatrists and being able to kind of talk about grief in much more and helping them in disseminating. The second thing that we've been doing is often mental health is really about invisible symptoms, things that people are unable to talk about or forget to talk about or are not even cognizant that they should talk about it to doctors. So one of the things that we were doing was building something which could help people to talk about these things, and you are able to catch patterns from it to say that, you know, hey, probably you should be talking to a grief counselor right now, or probably you need to be talking to a mental health counselor right now. So this was something that we were doing earlier. As of now, we are, now that there's so much going on, we'll probably get back to it now again. So I think those are 2 ways. And the third way is that COVID does have a lot of implications for neuropsychiatric disorders. There are a lot of studies that are coming out around that. And we've been talking to doctors about how we could do studies to understand the effect much better. So our tools really help them understand it much faster than they would have if they had to sit down and do all of that processing by themselves. It would have just been a very, very slow process. So our tools enable them to do that. So that's the third way that we're thinking about it.
Okay, interesting. Shilpa?
We have some audience questions coming in. This is from Ashish Chaubey. Has COVID slowed down work or research being done in health tech because of the unprecedented surge in cases and the load on the healthcare sector?
Short
yeah,
answer, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely. And so the entire TB ecosystem, so it's actually been very nicely fragmented and centralized under the government of India's health ministry and central TB division, where each state has TB offices and further district TB offices. And that entire infrastructure of the respiratory disease has been hijacked by COVID. As a result, TB has taken a hit. All TB patients have taken a hit, because they're already vulnerable. Their chest conditions, their lung conditions are already a vulnerability. Those patients don't go to the TB district centers with the fear of contracting COVID. So these are numbers from the past wave, the first wave, where the Stop TB group believed that it's 1.6 million additional TB cases are likely to occur in a year, where we usually get about 2.7 million cases already. So the incidence will increase by 1.6 million simply because of the pandemic. And this was only taking into account the first wave. So that's the kind of impact it's already having. And that's definitely slowed down our clinical validation process.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think both ways. I think one is, yes, it has affected clinical studies. It has affected all the other disorders like dementia and all the other things that we were working on. It's far more difficult for patients to actually go and get treatment for that. But there's also like this entire new set of problems that are very challenging, and for people who want to kind of work on a problem that has massive impact, there is a lot that the healthcare sector now has to offer, because you have all of these problems, you have so many new issues that are coming up, and people can contribute to it. Yep. So.
Yeah, I mean, similar here as well. I mean, from both perspectives, right? From cancer care, it has seen the impact, like Praapti said, both in first wave as second wave. You suddenly had patients coming to hospital, and then gradually it kind of came back, because if you had a patient on a chemotherapy kind of schedule, you can't stop somewhere in midway, right? So while the treatment or the therapy flow continued, from a diagnostic standpoint, or that process has suffered, right? Similar what we are seeing now during the second wave as well. From our work, from a core AI development, like I shared earlier, this has been one of the most productive times, right? Doctors are more definitely open to working virtually, and we are working on digital technologies anyway, right? We're looking at data, building models, AI models. So that hasn't necessarily affected our work. I mean, so it's been productive because we've added at least a couple of clinical collaborations. We've recently finalized our draft for a publication in the US. But our conversations, new conversations, or even adoption of new technology, those conversations have suffered, right? Because doctors don't have enough time to kind of talk about new things, right? So they're open to virtual, right, meeting on WhatsApp and Zoom, but that has definitely suffered, right? So that is something that we would want to come back to normal. But yeah, I mean, from a productivity standpoint, a lot of our work continues.
Sujit, you're on mute.
Yeah. There's an interesting related question from Nandita Shah. Did it change COVID basically? Did it change the mindset of VCs? Do they ask entrepreneurs to work in the COVID pandemic communicable disease space? Mm-hmm. Any pressure for any of you on that front?
No, not really. I haven't seen. I haven't been in any conversation where there has been more focus on taking away from what we are doing and focusing on other things. But there certainly have been questions around I think VCs have been very kind enough to ask us about how we are dealing with it within the team. I think not as a larger perspective, but within the team, how are we dealing with it, and what could make things better for us. So I think that's the way I have seen the conversation, Dinesh and Praapti.
Yeah, similar. I think there's no pressure, but I think they're more open, right? Like we were a cancer analytics platform, right? Instead, we said, what, can we use our workflow to look at PCR, which is typically viral load detection, right? And not necessarily anything to do with cancer. So we built this, and we have a few investors on board. They were pretty open. And when we talked to new as well, they kind of understand, okay, you had some capability, you're working on a relevant problem, right? Our goal is, 90% of our work still continues on cancer diagnostics, but we built this, and that is something that at least people are definitely more understanding of.
Yeah, and since Arogya works on infectious disease in general, so that was not as much of a problem. What I really enjoy now is that they understand transmissibility. They understand how these infectious diseases happen. They understand diagnostics and the importance of how accurate the diagnostics are, what is specificity, sensitivity. They're aware of regulatory processes. So if anything, the pandemic has helped educate them a little more. And like both of them have said, they have a better understanding of how healthcare systems can possibly work. So I see that as a positive for sure.
How easy or difficult is it to find mentors, to help you succeed in your startup journey? Because you all three of you been part of the GE Healthcare's India Edison accelerator program. So if you can talk about what kind of hand-holding did you find at GE Healthcare?
Yeah, getting mentors who understand the space is difficult, right? Healthcare is pretty niche. I keep saying this, healthcare startups need a lot more hand-holding and understanding of kind of challenges that we go through, right? So in that sense, someone who understands technology and business building, right? So that and in healthcare. So in that sense, the program has been great because these are folks who build technology and across disease spectrum, right? Oncology is obviously a big domain for them, so we obviously kind of started in right there. It also helps when what is a startup is a series of discoveries, right, and validations. So it does help when you're working with a mentor or an organization who are already at the front end, right, and they've seen different challenges that come up towards adoption of technology. So that definitely helped, right? So being able to learn from that, right? Then accelerates the learning, right, which is exactly the program, right? It accelerates what we would have learned over maybe 9-12 months, right? We were able to do it within like 2-3 months, right? So that was the biggest benefit, right? Which is what a mentor actually brings to the table for a startup like ours.
Absolutely. And I have a perspective that we had when we were 3 months old, we had applied and we had not gotten to the program. And so for the next 12 months, we were really kind of figuring out things on our own, as opposed to when we applied now and got through, and the learning has been phenomenal. So I think in the past 12 months, we really kind of struggled to make sense and to kind of take all of these inputs and put it all together, though we were making progress. And we've seen the massive difference that people like Dr. Ram, Dr. Suresh, and all who've been working with us from GE have made in our journey. So yeah, it has been fantastic. But overall, I would agree with Dinesh that having healthcare mentors and people who understand the healthcare space, the regulations, there are very few of them.
But all of you are also working with international hospitals and all that. So don't they also help you? What kind of experiences? What kind of work are you doing with those hospitals there, international ones?
So, they're still clinicians, right? So they know their clinical problem, right? So it's two different, right? So all of us are here building businesses around, there's research. Research is a big part of our innovation. But we're also about taking that research out and building a business around it, and a sustainable business around it, right? So clinicians are great, around research, that's their problem area, right? And happy to help us make progress. When it comes to around taking that, translating it to building a sustainable business, which is the biggest place. And like, Laina also mentioned, there's business. Prior to that, there's validation, right? Because doctors, the reason everybody says doctors are slow to adopt technology is because, yeah, ultimately I'm going to put it on patients. Right, so I better be sure, right, what I'm using to take a critical treatment decision. So that is the reason you have to follow these processes, and they're pretty much justified in asking for those. Have you done this? All these checks and balances. Folks who can help us translate that. I mean, it's a fairly small population.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, that's a point. I think Laina and Praapti and we were discussing the other day. AI making it believable to doctors. I mean, to tell doctors must be convinced that okay, what this AI is telling me is indeed the truth. Believable AI in some sense. So how do you do that? How do you ensure that doctors get convinced?
So explainability, right? Yeah, sorry, Laina. Yeah, please.
So what I was saying, sorry, Dinesh, essentially explainable. So there is a subfield within AI, which is kind of really focusing on explainable AI algorithms instead of like black box AI algorithms. So black box algorithms are essentially telling you that they're giving you a result without really saying why they're saying what they're saying, while you have this subset, which is explainable, and they're able to say, this is the reason. So we really focus on that subset of algorithms. And the second part of how we want to make it more understandable and believable for doctors is we take all of that computational neuroscience work we do and we bring it back to the brain space. So what that visualization enables is that it enables the doctor to say that this doesn't work with my understanding. You're showing connectivity patterns between these two sets of the brain, but that's not how this works. And when you're able to question that and put the power back in the hands of the doctor, it makes a massive difference to how they adopt it. I think somebody had very rightly said that Microsoft Excel did not kind of become popular because of the squares and everything were there, even at Lotus, but they put the power back in the hands of the programmer who was sitting there. And I think we need to put the power back in the hands of the doctor for them to believe AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Laina. And a lot of times, when people, we meet people and a lot of them have said, "Arey, artificial intelligence, human intelligence ko replace nahi kar sakta." We completely agree. Nahi kar sakta. We're only augmenting human intelligence. There are limitations and capacities like what we do. We look at reams and reams of genomic data. A doctor or a microbiologist or a technician cannot possibly go through all of those reams. We just make sense of all of that for them. I think this is me speaking on behalf of each of the three startups here. We're simply making all of that information concise and easy for that doctor to make that decision, to take that right call, just to help them to make that right call so that it becomes easier for them. And we're in no way wanting to replace any medical professional at all.
Yes, you can, Dinesh, you can respond to this. But I mean, exactly the point Praapti is also saying. I mean, a few years ago when Shilpa and I saw that demonstration in Manipal Hospital of IBM Watson, as people who cover technology, I mean, you know what, they filled in all those fields, and then there comes the diagnosis and saw the prescription and all of that. And at that point, I felt, now is this the end of doctors? I mean, but obviously it hasn't happened. I guess even patients, I don't know what's the psychology here. I mean, patients also believe the doctor more than this AI and stuff, or what?
Well, so I can talk of at least in oncology, right? So you definitely have a lot of semantics happening, right? In terms of putting all of this information together, right? Like I said, they're already doing a lot of data science in their head, right? Doctors, but you definitely need them, right? As part of a decision-making process. I think the specific example there, you mentioned is also one of the things that improves the success of whatever you build is involving the clinician right through the process, right? So that's what is going to determine adoption, right? So building cool, fancy stuff is okay, but tomorrow, if it doesn't fit in the workflow, right? If there is a certain way that a clinical facility works or a clinician works, and if the solution that you build does not, match that process, right? It can bring innovation and helping them take better decisions or doing it faster, whatnot. But if it's completely different, right? You're asking the doctor to change their process, right? Just to use your solution, that's a recipe for failure. So involving doctors through the process in terms of product development, that at least that's what helped us, right? In terms of, they come in with a vote of confidence. You know what? I've seen this work. I've been involved in the process, and I'm happy to use it. So at least that's the way we have gone about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shilpa?
We have one question from Manjunath KS. How can health tech startups ensure their tech is understood and implemented by healthcare workers?
This is
Kind of
something
what
we're
Dinesh just said, but
yeah, and it's something that is at the health, like one of our priorities is, so I understood this problem statement when I was actually at a training where at one of the government centers that actually try to do genomic detection for drug-resistant TB. I saw that the technician was struggling. The technician can do what they're told to do, but for them to run 5 or 6 complex algorithms to make sense of all of that data is really hard. So the way we're trying to do it is to make a very simple drag and drop mechanism. The point, exactly like Dinesh alluded to a second ago, was if we're not going to make life easier for them, why should they bother? So the whole plan is to not make it more difficult for anybody on the ground, make it easier for them, make it faster and more intuitive. Like you can't ask someone to run code on a terminal on a computer. They have 100 things to handle, and pressures are very, very different on the ground for healthcare technicians, more so in a pandemic setting or a massive infectious disease setting. So I think the mantra we have is to make it so simple that a 4-year-old can just execute it.
Okay, yeah, almost out of time. We are actually out of time, but let quick one last question from Samshwi. What learnings can health tech startups take from traditional Indian medicine and way of life? Anybody wants to?
Wow, I think practice meditation, and then if you want to build a startup, this is a long journey. That's that is what I can say. We can talk about the way we built the startup, right? We've been at this for 3.5 years, and it's a fairly long journey in terms of the vision. As long as you're clear what you want to achieve, building a healthcare and that to a deep tech startup takes time. Have the right set of partners upfront, right? So, but from a science perspective, we are completely conventional medicine. We haven't at least looked at adopting traditional medicine or methodologies at least yet.
Okay. Shilpa, shall we wind it up?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Dinesh, Laina, Praapti, wonderful having you here. I mean, right now with this pandemic, I mean, you are exactly the kind of people we need. So fantastic job all of you are doing. LV, I'm sure, I mean, we'll be following your work closely, hoping your products will, of course, some of your work has already come out in various ways, but some of the final products look absolutely fascinating, and we'll be looking forward to it. Do keep us informed of progress, and we hope to be in touch with you in coming days. Thanks so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
And all of you stay safe, to the audience as well. Be careful. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for
Thanks a
having
lot.
us.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Sujit. Thank you, Shilpa.
Bye.
Bye. See you guys.